The text message from my sister glowed with a kind of chipper tyranny I'd come to associate with all things wedding-related. Alex is going to pop over tonight to help you with your dance steps. Isn't he the sweetest? Don't be difficult, Liam. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, cycling through a dozen polite ways to say, I would rather set myself on fire. I settled for a simple, non-committal okay. It was easier than explaining that the thought of a stranger, a handsome, confident stranger who was also the best man, in my tiny, quiet apartment for the express purpose of teaching me how not to look like a malfunctioning robot at her wedding was my own personal circle of hell. My life was a carefully curated collection of quiet routines. I worked from home as a graphic designer. My social interactions were limited to polite emails and the occasional, blessedly brief video call, and my evenings were spent with books and the low hum of my refrigerator. I wasn't unhappy. I was contained, insulated. The wedding was a breach in my defenses, a glittering, champagne-fueled invasion of noise and expectation. And the dancing was the vanguard of that invasion. I didn't dance. I stood near walls, nursed a drink, and perfected an expression of pleasant, detached interest. Alex was the groom's best friend, a man I'd only met once at the engagement party. My memory of him was frustratingly vivid. He had the easy posture of someone who had never felt out of place in his own skin. He'd laughed a lot, a low, genuine sound that made people lean in. He had dark hair that fell over his forehead when he looked down, and a way of meeting your eyes that felt both casual and intensely direct. He was, in short, the kind of man I spent my life quietly observing from a safe distance. Having him come to my sanctuary to critique my footwork felt like a violation of some unspoken treaty. At precisely 7 o'clock, a firm, confident knock echoed through my apartment. Not too loud, not too soft. Of course. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my plain gray t-shirt for the third time, and opened the door. He was taller than I remembered. He stood on my welcome mat, framed by the dim hallway light, and a faint, clean scent drifted in with him, sandalwood and something citrusy, like bergamot. It was subtle, not the aggressive fog of cologne some men wore. It smelled like warmth. Liam? Hi. I'm Alex. He offered a hand, and his smile was a little crooked, a little apologetic, as if he knew this was an imposition. Sarah's enlistment officer. I managed a weak smile in return, my hand suddenly feeling clammy as I took his. His grip was warm and dry, his fingers wrapping firmly around mine for a second longer than necessary. Right. The mission, should I choose to accept it. His smile widened, reaching his eyes. They were a warm, deep brown, flecked with gold. Something like that. She said you might need some convincing. She underestimates my capacity for being difficult, I said, the words coming out drier than I intended. I stepped back, gesturing him inside. Come in. Can I get you a water? Or something stronger? God knows I might need it. He chuckled, that same low sound from the party, and it seemed to fill the quiet space of my living room. Water is fine, thanks. I watched him as I moved to the kitchen. He didn't hover awkwardly by the door. He walked into the center of the room, his hands in the pockets of his jeans, and took it all in. My meticulously organized bookshelves, the neutral gray couch, the single abstract print on the wall. He scanned it all with a quiet curiosity that felt more unnerving than outright judgment. It was like he was reading a biography of me I hadn't written yet. Nice place, he said, turning as I handed him the glass. Our fingers brushed. A stupid, insignificant little shock of static electricity, but my pulse jumped anyway. It's very calm. It's where I go to hide from the world, I admitted, and then immediately regretted the honesty. It sounded pathetic. But Alex just nodded, taking a slow sip of water. His gaze was steady over the rim of the glass. I get that. Sometimes the world is too loud. That wasn't the response I expected. I'd anticipated a platitude, a cheerful dismissal. But his simple agreement felt like a shared secret, and it threw me off balance. For a moment, we just stood there in the middle of my living room, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken things. I was intensely aware of the 2 feet of air separating us, of the sound of his breathing, of the way the light from the lamp caught the dark strands of his hair. He broke the silence first, setting his glass down on the coaster I'd reflexively placed on the coffee table. So, shall we? He rubbed his hands together, a gesture of mock enthusiasm. Your sister is expecting a transformation. From what she says, we're starting with sentient plank of wood and aiming for passably human. I couldn't help but let out a short, surprised laugh. That's generous of her. I was aiming for coat rack with anxiety. The corner of his mouth twitched. Well, I like a challenge. He looked around. We don't need music. Not yet. It's just a distraction. This is about mechanics first. He gestured to the small open space between the couch and the television. Here is good. My heart began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. This was it. The moment of reckoning. I felt my shoulders tense, my posture stiffening in anticipation of the awkwardness to come. Alex seemed to sense it. His whole demeanor softened. Hey, he said, his voice dropping a little. It's just dancing. It's not a deposition. There are no wrong answers. You haven't seen my wrong answers, I muttered, but I moved to stand in front of him. He was close. So close I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. He smelled even better up close. I forced myself to meet his gaze, bracing for the instruction, the inevitable manhandling. Okay, he began, his tone businesslike, but his eyes were still kind. Basic box step. It's the foundation for everything. Leads left foot goes forward. Follows right foot goes back. He demonstrated a slow, easy movement. It looked ridiculously simple when he did it. Now, the frame. He paused, his hands hovering in the air between us. Is this okay? He asked, his gaze searching mine. He was asking for permission to touch me. The consideration was so unexpected it left me momentarily speechless. I just nodded, my throat suddenly tight. His left hand found my right, his fingers lacing through mine with an easy confidence. His hand was large, enveloping mine completely. A current of warmth traveled up my arm. Then, his right hand, slowly, deliberately, came to rest on the small of my back. It wasn't a clinical, instructor-like placement. It was a solid, grounding pressure. His palm was flat against my shirt, and I could feel the heat of it seeping through the thin cotton, spreading across my skin like a blush. My breath hitched. My entire nervous system lit up, every nerve ending zeroed in on that single point of contact. He is just teaching you to dance. My brain supplied the rational thought, but my body wasn't listening. My body was humming with a different kind of electricity, an awareness that had nothing to do with footwork. Okay, he said, his voice a low murmur near my ear. Your job is just to follow. Don't think. Just feel where I'm guiding you. Don't think. It was like telling a fish not to swim. My mind was a chaotic swirl of sensation and panic. The solid weight of his hand on my back. The firm, dry grip of his fingers around mine. The faint, clean scent of his skin. The sheer proximity of him, his chest just inches from my own. Breathe, Liam, he said softly. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I let it out in a shaky exhale. All right, forward, he commanded gently. He stepped forward with his left foot, and the pressure from his hand guided me to step back with my right. It was clumsy. My foot landed half on top of his. Sorry, I mumbled, my face burning. Don't be. He was so steady, a fixed point of gravity, and I was a clumsy satellite wobbling in his orbit. We tried the box step. Once, twice, a dozen times. My feet felt like they were encased in cement. My body was a rigid, uncooperative plank, just as Sarah had described. I was so focused on the feeling of his hand on my back, the brush of his thigh against mine as we moved, that the instructions became meaningless noise. I was hyper-aware of everything. The way his thumb would occasionally stroke the back of my hand, a small, almost imperceptible movement. The way his body heat radiated towards me, a tangible presence in the cool air of my apartment. I watched the pulse beat in his throat, steady and strong. I watched the way his lips formed the words of instruction, the focus in his dark eyes. He was endlessly patient. He never sighed, never showed a hint of frustration. He'd just stop, reset, and say, let's try again. Loosen up your shoulders. You're holding all your tension there. I tried. I really did. I tried to roll my shoulders, to relax my arms, to bend my knees. But every time he would start to move, his body leading mine, my brain would short-circuit. All I could think was, he's holding me. Alex is in my apartment, holding me. After another particularly clumsy sequence where I nearly sent us both toppling into my television stand, he stopped. He didn't let go, though. His hand remained, a warm weight on my back. His other hand still held mine. "This isn't working," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. "I told you," I said, my voice tight with frustration and embarrassment. Coat rack. With anxiety, I tried to pull my hand away, to put some space between us and salvage what was left of my dignity. He didn't let me. His grip tightened just enough to be insistent. "No, that's not it." He looked at me, his head tilted slightly, his expression searching. It felt like he was looking right through the awkwardness, past the clumsy feet, and into the frantic, terrified core of me. "You're thinking about every single step before you take it," he said, his voice quiet, intimate. "You're trying to predict what I'm going to do instead of just reacting to it. You're in your head. You're not here." He tapped his forefinger lightly against my chest, right over my heart. "You're not here." The observation was so accurate, so perceptive, it felt like a physical blow. He saw it. He saw me. Not the quiet, aloof graphic designer, but the overthinking, disconnected man inside. "I don't know how to not be in my head," I confessed, the words barely a whisper. A strange softness entered his eyes. "I used to be the same way," he said. The admission hung in the air between us. Always felt like I was on the outside of a joke everyone else got. At parties, I'd count the tiles on the floor. Anything to avoid looking at people. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the image of the confident, easygoing man in front of me with the boy who counted floor tiles. It didn't compute. "What changed?" I asked. He let go of my hand and used his to gesture vaguely. "I don't know. Got tired of it, I guess. Realized nobody is paying as much attention as you think they are. And the ones who are, well, sometimes you just have to trust them." His gaze locked with mine, and the word trust seemed to land with a physical weight in my chest. He took a small step back, finally breaking the contact. The loss of his hand on my back was immediate and acute. A sudden coolness spread across the spot where his warmth had been. I felt untethered. "Let's try something different," he said, a new energy in his voice. "Forget the steps. Forget the box. Forget all of it." He moved to my phone, which was sitting on the counter. "No music, you said," he mused, tapping the screen. I lied. A moment later, a slow, simple melody filled the room. A single acoustic guitar, melancholic and sweet. It was nothing you could do a box step to. It was music for swaying in the dark. He walked back to me, his eyes holding mine. He didn't ask for permission this time. He just reached out, taking my hand again. His other hand returned to my back, but this time it was lower, resting on the curve of my waist, his fingers splayed against my hip. The gesture was more possessive, more intimate. He pulled me closer. This time, there was no space between us. My chest was flush against his. I could feel the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the steady, slow beat of his heart. The fabric of his shirt was soft under my palm. "Now," he murmured, his breath warm against my temple. "No steps. Just move with me. If I move, you move. That's the only rule." He began to sway, a slow, simple side-to-side motion in time with the quiet guitar. He wasn't leading me in a dance anymore. He was just holding me, and we were moving. My mind went blissfully, terrifyingly blank. There were no steps to remember, no sequence to predict. There was only the solid presence of him, the gentle pressure of his hand on my waist, the soft music, and the slow, hypnotic rhythm of our bodies swaying together. My head naturally found the curve of his shoulder, and I rested it there, closing my eyes. I could smell his skin, that clean, warm scent, and it was intoxicating. My rigid posture melted away. My shoulders dropped. My body, finally free of my brain's tyranny, just followed. We swayed like that for the entire length of the song. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of quiet, shared motion. It was the most intimate thing I had ever done. More intimate than any fumbled, disconnected physical encounter from my past. This was a connection of a different sort. It was quiet. It was patient. It was real. When the last note of the guitar faded into silence, we didn't stop. We kept swaying, the only sound in the room the soft whisper of our clothes and our breathing. I should have moved. I should have pulled away, made a joke, thanked him for the lesson. But I was trapped, not by his arms, but by the overwhelming, terrifying comfort of being there. He shifted slightly, and I lifted my head from his shoulder. His face was very close to mine. His eyes were dark, his expression unreadable. His gaze wasn't on my eyes anymore. It had dropped to my mouth. My heart didn't just beat, it slammed. Once, twice. A heavy, painful thud that echoed in my ears. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with a voltage that made the hair on my arms stand up. This is it. This is the moment where I pull away, where I laugh it off, where I retreat back into my safe, contained world. I don't move. I can't. My feet are rooted to the floor. My eyes are locked on his. I watch as his own gaze flickers, a silent conversation happening in the space of a few inches. He's asking a question, and my stillness is the answer. His voice, when he speaks, is a rough whisper. It's not a question about dancing. It's about everything. Is this what you were so afraid of? I couldn't have formed a word if my life depended on it. All the noise in my head, the constant chatter of anxiety and self-doubt, had gone utterly silent. There was only the here and now, the warmth of his hand on my waist, the intent look in his eyes, the few inches of air between his lips and mine. I gave the smallest, most infinitesimal shake of my head. No, this wasn't what I was afraid of. I was afraid of this ending. That was all the confirmation he needed. He closed the remaining distance, slowly, giving me every possible chance to turn away. His eyes fluttered shut just before his lips met mine. The practice was over. The contact was impossibly soft. It wasn't a kiss of hungry passion or pin-up demand. It was a kiss of discovery. It was tentative, questioning. His lips were warm and gentle, moving against mine with a searching tenderness that undid me completely. All the tension I'd been holding in my body for years, for my entire life, it felt like, just dissolved. My hand, which had been resting on his shoulder, slid up, my fingers tangling in the soft hair at the nape of his neck. I kissed him back. I put every ounce of unspoken loneliness, every moment of quiet yearning, every silent observation from across a crowded room into that kiss. I felt him respond, a low sound vibrating in his chest. His hand on my waist tightened, pulling me impossibly closer, until there was no part of us left untouched. The kiss deepened, no longer a question, but an answer. A long, slow, declarative statement. It was right. It felt more right than anything in my life had ever felt. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't awkward. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. The faint scratch of his stubble against my skin, the taste of him, the solid, grounding presence of his body against mine. It was a sensory overload of the most beautiful kind. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. He didn't move away. He rested his forehead against mine, our noses brushing. His eyes were still closed. I kept mine open, studying the relaxed line of his mouth, the faint tremor in his hand that was still gripping my waist. He wasn't as unshakably confident as I had thought. He was here, in this, just as much as I was. The silence descended again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was full. It was heavy with what had just happened. My mind, slowly, started to reboot. And with it came the fear. A cold, creeping dread that washed over the warmth of the last few minutes. What have I done? What does this mean? He was just being nice. He felt sorry for me. It was an impulse. A mistake. I pulled back an inch, my hand falling from his neck. The sudden doubt must have shown on my face, because his eyes snapped open, and the softness in them was replaced by a sharp, focused concern. "Liam," he said, his voice low and firm. He saw me starting to retreat, to build my walls back up brick by painful brick. I started, but I had no idea what I was going to say. "I'm sorry. Thank you. Please leave." "Don't," he cut me off gently. He reached up, his thumb brushing against my lower lip, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. "Don't you dare retreat into your head right now. Stay here." He tapped my chest again, in the same spot as before. "With me." I looked at him, my heart a tangled mess of hope and terror. "Why?" I whispered. It was the only word I could manage. "Why me? Why this?" A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Because I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you at the engagement party, standing by the wall, trying so hard to look like you didn't want anyone to notice you." He shook his head slightly. "It had the opposite effect on me. All I could do was notice you." The confession hit me with the force of a physical blow. All those months, I had been the observer, the one looking on from the outside. It had never, not once, occurred to me that someone might be looking back. "That kiss," he continued, his gaze unwavering. That wasn't for practice, Liam. And it wasn't me being nice. I felt a tremor run through me, a release of tension I didn't even know I was holding. The fear didn't vanish, but it subsided, replaced by a fragile, fluttering hope. I had spent so long believing I was invisible, and here was this man, this kind, steady, beautiful man, telling me he'd seen me all along. I made a conscious choice. For the first time, maybe ever, I chose not to run. I chose not to analyze or overthink. I chose to trust. I leaned my forehead back against his. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a decade. A small, shaky laugh escaped me. "Well," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "For what it's worth, I'm still a terrible dancer." Alex laughed, a real, deep laugh this time. The sound was pure joy. "Good," he said, his hand sliding from my waist to take mine, his fingers lacing through my own. The simple, solid connection was an anchor. We can forget about the wedding. We can forget about the dancing. He led me over to the couch and sat down, pulling me down with him. He didn't let go of my hand. We just sat there, side by side, our knees brushing, our fingers intertwined on the cushion between us. The quiet of my apartment no longer felt like insulation. It felt like intimacy. I looked down at our joined hands. His, large and capable, wrapped around mine. It looked right. It felt right. I had braced myself for an evening of awkward performance, of feeling clumsy and exposed in the worst way. I had come for a practice dance. But Alex hadn't been interested in the steps. He'd skipped the music, ignored the choreography, and gone straight for the truth. He hadn't just taken my mouth. He had taken my hand and led me out of the quiet, lonely corner where I had been standing my entire life. He squeezed my hand gently, a silent reassurance. I looked up at him, and he was already looking at me, a soft, hopeful smile on his face. The fear was still there, a faint hum in the background, but for the first time, it wasn't the loudest thing in the room. The loudest thing was the steady, reassuring beat of my own heart, finally in time with someone else's. I was no longer on the outside. I was here. I was part of the dance. And I had a feeling we were just getting started.